The HR Stories podcast is brought to you by the team at HR Stories. The team at HR Stories helps businesses, nonprofits, and HR practitioners better manage the employee experience, providing the tools, training, and resources needed to get HR right. For more information, check out our website at theteam@hrstories.com. Each week on the HR Stories podcast, HR and leadership experts John Thalheimer and Chuck Simikian dive into the stories that matter most to you, our listeners. We have found that there is a lesson in every story. And now our host, John Thalheimer and Chuck Simikian. Welcome to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story. Let's hear it for Chuck Simikian, HR director, expert, and all-around fun guy.
Fun guy. Oh my gosh, wait. Fungi, like fungus?
That's right, like a mushroom.
I like it. All right. I'm all around fun guy. So what are we talking about today, John? Oh, and by the way, welcome John Thalheimer to the HR Stories podcast. I'm excited to be here. We've got a different type of HR Stories podcast today. Not so much on stories, but maybe a collective experience of sorts, where John and I have going into 2025. We've been thinking about audits, and we get this question all the time. What should I prepare for? What should I do? What type of audits should I do? And so there's been a lot in the news about the upcoming Trump administration and things that are going to be happening. And so John said, "Hey, Chuck, why don't we do a whole HR Stories podcast on HR audits and tips and all that great stuff?" So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to John.
Yeah, I mean, we were supposed to do a Q&A today, right? We were supposed to do one of our Q&As, and we get a lot of questions about how do I do self-guided audits? How do I do self-audits for my HR department? What do I need to do? That kind of stuff. And so I thought it was good. We do have a book out called A Guide to Human Resources Self-Audits. It's more of a booklet than a book. But so we have that available, and we'll give you in the notes how to get that and kind of pull that up. So I think we should start, Chuck, and discuss what are HR audits and why are they critical? So can you help me? I know this is something like I'm going to say this is kind of one of your places of expertise, your strengths. So tell me and our listeners, why do we need to do audits? What's the purpose of them? What do they serve?
Well, what they serve is, and I talk to my team about this all the time, is we've got to run a tight ship. Okay. And so when you do audits, it's, you're running a ship. You're running the ship through the oceans and the turmoil of the workplace. And so, are the holes plugged in the ship? Is there any potential corrosion that could create an imbalance in the ship? Are your defenses ready to go? Are the propulsion, is everything running right? Because here's the deal. You do audits to make sure you are ship shape. You are running a tight ship. And if you don't, then you're going to be constantly plugging holes when you didn't expect them. Okay. At least with audits, John, you can predict and you're forcefully, not the word forcefully. I guess the word would be, there's a word for it. Proactively. You're proactively looking for holes rather than reactively responding to holes in the ship. And once you have the holes plugged and you're keeping an eye on corrosion and the propulsion is running, that ship is going to run fairly smooth through the turmoil and tumultuous ocean of the workplace. But if you're constantly responding to things that are popping up because you didn't do an audit, you didn't check your files, you didn't check your I-9s, and we're going to talk about all those, then you're just going to be constantly running around putting out fires. I hope that kind of explained things in a
Yeah, I
different
love
way.
that analogy. And I think though that you've been down in the Keys a little bit too long now. Maybe it's time to get back on real land. No, but I think that's a great analogy, right? Because you are in that overseeing this ship, the workplace, and doing that. And audits are those proactive ways to make sure that what you're doing is you're doing things right and you're not missing anything.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a lot of audits. We're going to talk about 4 or 5 different audits today that that we think we would recommend kind of doing right away. And just kind of getting your organization ship shape, right? And I think that's a really good promise to kind of work through that and do that. I do think that it's critical not only for the HR department, but I also think organizationally, it it does something about your level of professionalism, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
when you're going out and you're correcting your mistakes or going in there and taking care of things, and you go, in your case, to the general manager, go, hey, we need you to make this adjustment. I noticed this was happening. Or, hey, we're having this issue with our managers and supervisors, so I'm going to send them to John's training so they can be better at doing these things, right? I think those are the things that we help us set that level of professionalism, especially when you're a department of one.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
that is critical. That department of one of those small HR departments, you cannot afford to. And sometimes they're going to say, some folks are saying, well, we don't have time. We don't have
Yeah.
time. But geez, if you don't do it and you have unexpected situations coming on, you're gonna need more time than you could ever believe.
Yeah, and it's time management, right? It's taking care of it proactively saves you that time in the reactive.
Where do you want to go, John? How do you want to navigate this ship
Look at you
today?
going with the navigation. Well, I got my sails out and my rudder. And so here's what I'm thinking. I know that you have, through your career, done lots and lots of audits. And so
Yes.
I would love to hear from you. Where do you start? Like, where does Mr. Samikian, Chuck Samikian, when you go in, I call you up, hey, I need you to audit my HR department. Where are you going to start and why is that important?
Well, I've said this countless times, and a lot of our frequent listeners may have heard this, is I'm starting with the I-9s. I'm going in and at least I'm going to look at the I-9s when I go into an HR department. I'm going to be doing the I-9s on a yearly basis. And so I start with, well, I do start with files. Okay. Where are the files? How are the files kept? Do we have terminated files, active files? Are the files clean? Run a roster, whatever. But I-9s are the ones they're going to get you. And folks, we're talking about this today because in the fall of 2024, over the last several weeks, there have been a number of articles that have come out warning companies to go ahead and get ready because the new administration, and folks, it happens every time there's a change in administration, different priorities, is going to be really focusing and doubling down on I-9s. And it may not happen. It may not happen right away. But John, I have a not so much a story, but I have an example on the last time the Trump administration was in power. It took about 1 year. But in July of 2018, the Immigration Control ICE delivered 5,200 I-9 audit notices to businesses across the United States. Boom, in 1 day, 5,200 I-9 audits notices were served. And when that was all done, at the end of the day, they actually made, and I didn't know this, they made 32 arrests based on the findings in those I-9 audits. So I just found that fascinating to say, could that happen again? And a lot of experts are saying it will. So folks, overall I-9s, and even more importantly, I-9s today.
I remember, Chuck, doing workshops during that period and literally graphing out so it was Obama administration was before, graphing out the number of concerns, the number of times and audits that were done, and there was a spike. And there was definitely a spike and continued to go on there. What I haven't done, I probably should have done for the podcast, is looked at the Biden administration and where it was. My guess is it went down to a relatively lower number, but maybe not as low as the Obama administration. Immigration is in there, right? And we know that there's going to be a lot of turmoil around immigration. It's already been forecasted that way. So I do think you're right. I do think that there's going to be more opportunities for companies to be audited around the I-9s. And can I ask you, Chuck, and again, if you don't know, that's okay, but why do you think certain companies will be audited and the other ones won't? What do you think the factor is on there? It's a little different than harassment, where it's normally internal. Where do you think that's going to come from?
Yeah, I think it's going to go to employers that have in the past used maybe, immigrant labor, maybe construction industries, primarily a lot of construction industries, perhaps hospitality industries. Those types of industries are going to probably be on the forefront, because here's the deal. The government is the government, right? And they don't want to go, they're not going to go to the grocery store down the street, the mom and pop grocery store. That's not big fish for them. They're going to look for big fish. And so I think those are the industries probably, but I have no facts with that, but that's my sense.
Yeah. And no, I think, again, right, we know that, and I said this in my class yesterday, a workshop I was teaching, we know that right now in the United States, there are a lot of open positions, especially in the construction industry, especially in the hospitality industry. And owners of these businesses are like, I need people. I got all these houses to build. I got all these people to serve. I just need to do it. And if I can't find anybody to do that work that is authorized to be in the United States, I may just turn to illegal immigrants. And so there was I think I mentioned this last time, but there was a big article in the Wall Street Journal about the construction industry in Texas and how it's an open secret that 25-35%, something like that, of labor there is illegal immigrants. So
yeah. And the other thing is, if we could just launch into something about what triggers an audit. And, because it's not just an audit, John, but it's raids also. They have when that came out in July of 2018, the first hit of 5,200, at that point, by the time Trump administration was done, they were doing an average of about 6,000 per year. And an audit can be triggered randomly, okay, like I just said, depending on the different industries, but also sometimes even frequently it's based on a tip off or irregularities in reporting. Reporting your I-9 info several, more than 3 or 4 days after the time limit, or some irregularities in E-Verify. Maybe an employer paying large sums of cash for payroll, or failing to form to file other forms incorrectly. And so when they see that, they're like, okay, where there's smoke, there may be some fire. And if there's other problems, I'll bet their I-9s aren't in order. And so, a raid typically follows an investigation, which could include confidential informants and in reports of violations. So there's a lot to it, but it all, like I said, running a tight ship and getting on the forefront can help you mitigate those things.
So what should I do as the HR department of one? What should I do in terms of auditing my I-9s? What should I be doing next week? Now that you got me in a panic mode, Chuck, what should I be doing around my I-9s?
Well, as our good friend Lisa Smith from the HR help desk would say, you cannot be audit proof, but you can be a little more audit secure. Okay. Yeah. So you can, and people can't see my hands if they're not watching us on YouTube, but bringing my hands together, you can close the gap, close the window. But if you get hit with an audit, the first thing you want to do is remain calm. Maybe reach out to legal counsel if you feel it's necessary, preferably an immigration attorney. But when served with a notice of inspection for an I-9 audit, you do have 3 business days to produce the requested documents. So calm down, John. You do have a little bit of time to get your stuff together. But here's a tip. Do not waive, because you're gonna have an option to waive the 3-day period. And even if you think I got it. Oh, yeah. There's, as you use the word hubris. Okay.
Yes,
I got it. I'm going to waive it the 3-day period. I'm going to show how cool I am. No, pro tip, never waive that 3-day period. It's your lifeline to prepare and still consult with legal attorney just to make sure.
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, I would go to an employment lawyer before I would go to a migrant attorney, but that's just me. And so kind of getting that there and getting prepared. All right, so they come in, they serve their notice. I have 72 hours to go through, make sure they're correct, make sure everything's buttoned up. Anything I should be doing now in terms of my self-audit? Like, how should I do a self-audit? I guess that's my question.
Sure. Oh boy, that's a whole class. That's a whole class. And folks, in case you don't know what John's talking about, we have written a book. It's just released. It's out on Amazon. Okay, it is out on Amazon right now. The Ultimate Guide to HR Checklist Edition. Go to Amazon.com. You can find a hard copy version or, paperback version, or you should be able to find a Kindle version. And we do have a number of resources in there on how to conduct I-9 audits. But the key here is preparation and vigilance. Number 1, conduct the I-9 audits, which we'll talk about here in a minute. Train your team. Make sure everyone involved in the hiring process knows the importance of the I-9s, the I-9 forms, and that new hire paperwork. That's really a lot of your frontline defense. And then you've got to enforce procedures for hiring and compliance. John, there's so much when it comes to an I-9 audit, but overall, I would say the first thing you need to do is run a list of all your active employees. Run a list of all your active employees, then go into your I-9 book, your I-9 files. Your I-9 should not be with your regular employee files. They should be separate. Some folks like me have ADP or UltiPro or Bamboo HR, and they will go ahead and store your I-9s for you. So maybe you want to look at people you hired before you started your HR system to make sure you have I-9s. So active employees, I-9s, check everything off. Then I would pull those I-9s and I would look at them very closely for discrepancies, for missing information. In fact, there are 10 common pitfalls that you employers do face during I-9 audits. And so here's some of the top 10 issues I think you and I have seen, because we will, folks, do an I-9 audit. We'll do one for you. We do them for a number of companies. If you're interested, check us out. Our contact information is below. But John, you want me to go over a few of these items as pitfalls?
Well, I'm thinking about time. right? I'm thinking about time because we just got into the first audit. We still have job descriptions, employee handbooks, and that kind of stuff. Here's the thing for everyone. I think it's important to go through your audits, pull them up, make sure the date's right, make sure the signatures are in place, look at all the details, and make sure they're right. If you really want a clear list of this, we do have the Ultimate Guide to HR. There is a checklist in there, and you can get all the details, but it's something that you should be doing. And that's really what I want to get across in this podcast today is, hey, you need to do your audits on the I-9s. I think Chuck set us up really good to be like, okay, there's a reason now that this is number one audit because of the expected increase in the number of audits that are being done.
All right, John, you know what? I'll put these in the show notes below for our folks. But there's one thing I do want to bring up is that the fines for I-9s, errors could be anywhere from $281 to $22,789 per form. And they do adjust those fees every year or so. So they are subject to go up and never really go down.
No, they never go down. Yeah. So that was good, Chuck. I mean, we probably spent a little more time, sure. But I that's cool, right? So we wanted to get that because I think it is important. I do think that is one of the things we're hearing forecasted. And we're going to go back, right? That's kind of a lesson. The other thing that I will say to everybody, we do have a podcast coming up where we got our glass ball out, our future looking ball, and we looked at it and our fortune teller, and we said, oh, here's what we're expecting under the new administration. And so we kind of went through that. So that's coming up. That's a podcast. I don't know. I forget where it is in our dates, but it is coming up. And so definitely listen to that podcast. Definitely do that as well.
John, what else we got? I know we've got more material to talk about.
Yeah. So the other thing this is a quick one, right? This is something that is easy to do. It will take you 10 minutes to do if you're doing it right, is to make sure that you have your posters up in a prominent location. We all know the posters, right? Chuck, you want to name a few? I got my list here in front of me, so I got the cheat sheet.
Well, the Fair Labor Standards Act poster, there's an Equal Employment Opportunity poster. Probably every state has a different one, but a minimum wage poster. Many states have different ones. Yeah. There's the OSHA poster, the FMLA poster. Did I miss any prominent posters, John? The
Employee Polygraph Protection Act.
Yeah, people don't think about that one.
Yeah, the whistleblower protection. We got URSA, unemployment compensation. All of those need to be up, right? And so it's just, again, there's a lot of services out there. I know Lisa Smith on her HR help desk has a poster thing that you can use. So I know a few of our listeners have that. The help desk, so definitely check that out. Typically, they change once a year, so you want to make sure they're up to date. And then just paying attention to that, I think, is the big one. So the other thing that we should be paying attention to is your employee handbook. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, Chuck, when was the last time your organization, putting you on the spot, updated the employee handbook?
It's funny you mentioned that because I pulled it up today to read through it. By the way, I'm a big believer in reading through the employee handbook from beginning to end at least once a year. And so I thought I'm going to print it out. And the latest version I had was 2023.
Ooh, so I believe,
but I believe going into 2025, there's a few things I want to add and just double check. I want to add a non-fraternization policy with employees and guests and employee and managers and their direct employees. So I was looking at that. So anyways, maybe about a year or so. Yeah,
that's about right. I mean, that's what again, right. As consultants, we're always letting people know like a year is the limit, right? A year is a limit. I'm working with this one client down in Nashville and nonprofit, and they're like, John, we need to update our employee handbook. Can you help with us that? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. and their employee handbook was nice. It was a good, solid employee handbook, but it was about 4 or 5 years old.
Right.
2 years ago, they completely changed their PTO. They went from sick and vacation days to having one bucket, and that was not reflected in their thing. And so that was something that we needed to add. Some of the language wasn't out of date, but it was sort of like it wasn't capturing the essence of what the regulations and the laws and what the laws have come to. And so we wanted to make sure we did that. They had moved locations, and so we had to take some language out. They had language about using the parking facilities, and they no longer had parking. Like that kind of stuff just makes you makes the organization look like amateur. I mean, I don't, not it wasn't amateur, and I don't want to say it that way, but it does like, well, why isn't this updated? My personal opinion, and Chuck, you may differ from me, is that the employee handbook should be dynamic and should be something that you're changing on a regular basis, right? And anytime a law changes, anytime circumstances change, you need to go there and change it. I know it's a secondary thing. When it's get done, it's secondary, but it's really important that you maintain it.
Yeah. And John, let's not forget technology. I mean, I've read through handbooks and they start talking about, don't use your personal, don't use the pager or the company pager for personal use or things like that. And you're like, okay, is the rest of the info in this handbook legit and up to date?
Yeah.
So I gotcha.
Yeah. So I think in terms of auditing, right? We're here to talk about auditing. Here's what, and I think Chuck, you're doing this right now, right? Go through your employee handbook, get your pencil, get your highlighter. And if there's anything that seems out of place or you're not sure of, highlight it. If there's notes you need to write those notes into it, go through it. And then I use a handbook creator, and I don't use it as I'm going to create the employee handbook from it, but I use it as a test. Like I pull it up and I go, okay, I'm going to be in this state. I'm going to be here in this city. And I pull it up. So that the one in Tennessee that I'm working on, Tennessee has this mini COBRA rule and regulation that starts at like 2 employees or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And so it's a little bit different, right? And so I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't done that employee creator. But going through that, updating it, looking at all your policies, looking at how they're written becomes critical to make sure, okay, we're doing this right. This is up to date. And then always check it with an HR consultant or an employment lawyer to make sure that it's up to date and ready to go. And then the communication comes out, right? Now you have to communicate like, hey, we have a new employee handbook. We're going to talk about it in the all staff meeting or whatever you're going to do, and make sure that everyone re-acknowledges it. Anytime you change it, make sure they're signing something that says, yep, I know this change was there. We acknowledge it, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Because like you often say, an outdated handbook is a liability.
Yeah.
So you are absolutely correct.
Yeah. All right, what else we got going? What else should we be auditing, Mr. Simikian?
Oh, boy. Well, it's not everyone's favorite topic, okay, but they are so critical. So many things rely on this, but the job descriptions, reviewing them annually, make sure they reflect current responsibilities. John, I don't know how many times, including where I am now, everywhere I've always been, someone says, you have a job description? Yeah, let me find it. And it hasn't been revised since 2015, 10 years ago. And they may not have ADA requirements or compliance on there or other things. So definitely job descriptions would be one I'd put on that list.
Yeah, I love job descriptions. I love looking at them. What?
Some people do.
Yeah. Because to me, they are so important to the whole organization. right? They're so important in terms of that employee's life tenure, life cycle, from the job posting to the interview questions to the hiring decisions to FMLA, ADA, performance management, termination. They're really that thread that binds that employee life cycle together. And if you don't have one, they're not updated, you can get in a lot of big trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And also you need to use it to help maybe defend how you've classified someone under the Fair Labor Standards Act.
Yeah, right. So, yeah. And so I think it's a great opportunity, speaking of the Fair Labor Standard Act and standard level of salary, it's a great opportunity to go through and make sure that you have the right knowledge and experience and the skill sets that that person needs. You have the right work context in there. You have the right level of task in there. You have the tools that they're going to use, right? You have all that stuff for each employee in there. And it's also a great time to take the finished ones and make sure that if this person's exempt, does that, if you have them as you have them set as exempt, does their duties match the FLSA 17A exemptions, right? Does it go in there to do that?
Yeah. And yeah, so we got job descriptions, we got posters, we got I-9 audits, we have the handbook. Any other critical things out there that is coming to the top of your mind?
And it's something you said at the beginning of the show, and I think it's important. And I gotta say, you talk about this all the time, and I'm just not sure how I would go about it. It seems overwhelming, and I'm talking about record keeping and documentation.
Oh, right.
Like, how would I audit those? How would I go in and go, oh, these are right? Because it seems overwhelming to me.
Yeah, well, that's good. You have a good memory because we've been talking for a while on this subject, and you are correct. So you are correct, sir. The record keeping, and I just talked to I've got a new HR coordinator, been on board for the last couple of weeks or so, and we went through an ownership exercise. I said, now that you've been here for a while, let's talk about what you're going to own. And I said, you're going to own filing and file management. I said, those are two different things, right? So I explained what file management was. It's keeping your active files up to date, keeping your terminated files, pulling out people that have left the company, keeping your medical files separate. And hey, do we have locks on these cabinets? Do we need to buy? We've got a new file cabinet, and I talked to her about this. I said, you can't put files in there yet. You can't, because we don't have a lock for it. We don't have the key. I said, so we're going to order. There's a thing you can buy. It's like a locking bar. You screw it to the side, and then you shut it, and then you lock it. It locks the file cabinet kind of externally. So those are the things you're going to be looking for. Are your files secured? Are they locked? Are they locked every night? Where's the keys? Are the medical files separate? Are the terminated files separate? How many years are you keeping your files? We keep, let's see, it's 2024. We have 2023 on site, and now we're getting into 2025. The 2022 files, I said, now you want to box those up, and you want to send them to the we used to, in the old days, it was called Iron Mountain. I don't know what we use now, but and you have to label them in case we ever need them. So those are the things you're going to need to audit. And then one other thing, John, is that I had a discussion with her today was addresses. It's December. We need to make sure all the employee addresses are updated, because in the world of transient hospitality, people move. And last February and March, everyone was wondering, where's my W-2?
Oh, yeah. Wow, that's great. Yeah, and I think there's so much, and it can be overwhelming. I love that kind of management process, and knowing, I think the other thing, which you kind of touched on, knowing what you can get rid of and what you have to hold on to. That record retention program becomes important. I think one of the things for me, I think that what really helps me is having that checklist to go through and go, all right, here's my process. Here's what I need to do. Because I think the beauty of it is when I have 10 minutes, I can go through a couple of files, make sure they're updated, make sure they're right. I don't need to sit down for hours on hours on hours and hours of going through it. When I have the time, I can go, oh, I can get through the A's today, and tomorrow I'll do the B's, and the next day I'll do the C's, and kind of help some of that, I think, can be really beneficial in there as well.
Yeah, a pro tip from John Thalheimer, conducting mini audits.
Mini audits, like yeah, just doing a little bit here and there. Okay, so I wanted to tell a story.
Tell a story, John. This is the HR Stories podcast.
This is an HR Stories podcast, and this is a good story, and it may be a good wrap-up story for today's episode because it involves I-9s and record retention. And I don't know where I heard this story, if it was from you or somebody else, but this company, right? This company had their I-9s and they had them stored, right? They had a binder for active employees and they had a binder for terminated employees and they had them in their locked office, right? Put them in the locked office. End of the day, the door's locked. Well, one day, the housekeeping service came in to clean up, right? Get all the offices clean, make them look good. The I-9s are sitting on top of the filing cabinet. Every single employee's identity was stolen.
Wow. So, I thought you were going to say that the cleaning company just threw them all away, but they didn't. They actually went way. That story went way where I didn't know it was going to go.
Yeah. And so they had to get identity insurance for everybody. That's expensive, right? It's expensive. And think about that in terms of trust, right? Here I am working for your company and my identity was stolen because of the company. That's a big trust issue, trust issue. And again, it was just because they didn't they thought they were locked. They thought they were secure. They didn't think about somebody from the outside, a housekeeping team coming in and cleaning and going, oh, these are interesting. Maybe I could use them to do something.
Yeah. Wow. Great story. And a great lesson here on the HR Stories podcast, where there's a lesson in every story. John, how do you want to wrap things up today?
My final thoughts is I think you should be doing auditing, right? And that's why we're having this. And I think there's lots of audits. We touched on a few of them. I just did a payroll law class today, and we got into some more audits in there, the non-exempt, exempt audits, all those kind of things. And it's really important that you be proactive, you, my listener, be proactive in your auditing and be prepared for next year. Now, here's the thing that I will tell you. You don't have to do this all right now. One of the things we did in our HR calendar checklist, which is available, I'm not sure. I think if you send us an email, we can send it to you. Or if you go to our website, Team at HR Stories, that's how you get it. The team at hrstories.com. If you sign up to our newsletter, we'll send that to you. And we put in there like, hey, you should do this audit now and this audit there. You don't have to do them in those months, but we're trying to kind of spread them out through the year. And so I think like breaking them up throughout the year, going, oh, you know what? In March is going to be my I-9 audit month. And then July, I know I'm a little slower, so I'm going to do the non-exempt and exempt, making sure they're right. And then in March, I'm going to do the record keeping one, right? Whatever. And so it's just kind of doing that. So those are my final thoughts kind of for this audit session.
Yeah, I like that. You know, I guess my final thought would be an HR audit a lot of times isn't about perfection, although you want to be as accurate as possible, but it's about progress and protection. Start small, focus on the essentials, and build from there.
Thank you for listening to our audit podcast. We wanted to kick off the year right and make sure that you had this information. Have a wonderful, wonderful 2025. We'll see you in 2026. No, just kidding. We will see you back here soon in 2025. We got some great episodes coming up for you. Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast. The material presented in this podcast is for informational purposes only. Chuck and John always recommend using an employment lawyer or HR consultant to handle any legal concerns or HR issues. We do our best to double check sources and make sure the information we are providing is accurate. We may eliminate or embellish without changing the basic narrative to make the story easier to understand. In certain circumstances, we may change identifying information to protect the innocent. The HR Stories broadcast is brought to you by the team at HR Stories. The team at HR Stories is designed to help anyone with HR responsibilities be better at managing the employee experience. To engage with us, go to the hrstoriesteam.com and learn more about how the team at HR Stories can support your business or nonprofit. Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story.